Okay, so today I'll be doing a short demo presentation on my final project. So, the first slide here is talking about history through questions, which is the idea of the project. And I came up with the idea for the project because I found that many of my students found history very boring and hard to connect with and more or less useless for their daily lives. That made me pretty sad because history is one of my greatest passions in life, and I wanted to find a way to spark students' interest in history as well as finding creative new ways to understand some content. Um, so, I also feel pretty strongly that it's important to tell the students exactly what you're teaching them and why, because I feel like to give some kind of performance without any kind of explanation to me seems a bit insulting to their intelligence. So at the beginning, I explain to them the project and why I'm doing it, and because I believe that these are the main points of the project, that asking questions helps us understand history in a new way, because most history is told through a narrative point of view. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, this happened, and told from the narrative of essentially the winners of history are the most powerful. Now, if you explore history through your own interests and your own questions, you can find lots of different perspectives, lots of different stories that may line up a little more with your experience with your life. So it can help us understand history in a new way. It can also help us look at a bigger picture. I also found that many of my students were sort of confused about what's happening in Spain, and I equated a lot of that misunderstanding personally to them not being given any kind of context to what was happening in Europe and the rest of the world at the time. Also, I believe this is one of the most important parts of history. It can help us connect with people who came before us. Because lots of times I think people believe that, not believe, but feel that they are the only people who have ever lived and that they have no way of connecting to anyone who's ever lived before them, and they're just so far off that they don't understand them. And can help us, of course, plan for the future, because if we understand our mistakes and missteps of the past, hopefully we can improve them when we try to move on. So, today's question is, why did the Second Republic end slash fail? I wanted to include both here because the original question was, why did the Second Republic fail? And one of the main narratives that I'm trying to get my students to escape from is that Spain can't do anything and that it's not like the other countries of Europe. And there seems to be kind of some self defeatism among my students about their opinions of their country and why certain things have happened. I really wanted to change that narrative and show them that there's a lot of other reasons why certain things may have happened in their country that were beyond the people who live there control. So end slash fail. End is a more neutral term than fail. Fail implies culpability. I didn't want to imply culpability. I just want to come at it from a point of observation. Okay, so to start off with something concrete, because we need to base ourselves in a concrete timeline before we talked about more abstract terms, because they are, after all, 12 years old and it can be hard. So we take it all back to the 19th century. Lots of loss of territory, unpopular wars, political instability. In 1929, the Great Depression starts. That's an important point because economy has a lot to do with why things happen in countries lots of times, and that's a larger context in the history of the Second Republic that I felt was not included in the book, but still makes a very large difference in terms of what happened. So in 1931, the Second Republic begins, the left wins elections. Very simple. So there's 2 years of leftist rule, and in 1933, the Nationalists win elections, ending the left's power for 2 or 3 years. And then in 1936, the left wins elections again, but the Civil War begins, anyways, with the coming of Franco and the coup d'etat in multiple Spanish cities. So, so type of reasons why this may have happened, why the Second Republic might have failed, and Civil War begins. So there's always historical political reasons. There, we're going to use a lot of greater context about the rest of Europe. There's going to be economic reasons and cultural reasons. So, the first ones are historical political reasons. And obviously, because I'm recording this alone in my room, I can't recreate the presentation exactly how it went because I'm trying to incite discussion. And actually, in class, it went really well. And I was really almost pleasantly surprised with how interested the students were in how things worked and what was happening in the rest of Europe and what happened in World War One and how did it affect what happened in Spain in the 30s, even though Spain wasn't in it, and all things like that. So, historical political reasons, Spain was a democracy in the past. Um, Oftentimes, when democracies come straight out of nothing, just grown out of the rubble of a former society, they fail. Like in France in the early 19th century. But as you can look through history, lots of times the more stable democracies are grown over centuries of slow and incremental progress, like in the UK. Also, the Republic elected the support of major democracies. This is a really important point because I think this is one of the things I really wanted to explain to the students is not only why did the Civil War start, but why it was lost by the Republicans. And a lot of that had to do with military support from Germany and Italy towards the nationalists, and a lack of military support from the larger and more powerful democracies of the world at the time, which of course were France and UK, and to a lesser extent the United States. And if we want to understand why the great democratic powers of the West didn't support Spain in this crucial moment, we have to understand World War One. We have to understand how many people died. We have to understand what kind of effect that had on French and English society in the 20s and 30s. And I think that's a good vehicle for them to understand the greater context of what was happening. And another political reason is society was very chaotic during the Republic. And lots of times, I think it can be easy to say, oh, well, the Republic failed, and that's that. And not really thinking about the reasons, but if you think about what daily life was like for an ordinary citizen during the Second Republic, even though we oftentimes idealize Second Republic, the reality was life was very chaotic. Not only because it was a time of political turmoil, but because, like we mentioned earlier, the Great Depression had started, and that was a global problem, and people were just simply hungry and didn't have enough to eat. So there was also economic reasons, the Great Depression and wealth inequality. Wealth inequality is really historical in Spain. There's usually more or less two classes, the very, very wealthy, of which there are very few, and the vast majority of peasants who don't have much say in society at all. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of how a democracy might function, because the interest of both of those parties is always going to be in contra. So, and then also what was really exciting about this part of the presentation is I expected to not spend much time on the economic reasons because I figured it would bore the students. Is actually we got into a long discussion about how banks work and why the Great Depression happened. And because, as one bright student asked me, um, and this led to discussion about how banks work, because I said in the 30s everyone was losing money. And this young lady raised her hand and said, if everyone was losing money, where was all the money going? And that's a really good question, because if you don't understand basically how loans work and banks work and finance, where was all the money going? It's an excellent question. So we spent a good amount of time answering that question. And I think they walked away with a little more understanding about how modern capitalist society works. So let's move on. Cultural reasons. This was the where I wanted to tread the most lightly in the presentation because I felt that it's very easy to fall into stereotypes here. Well, cultural reasons. Oh, well, Spaniards aren't reasonable and they're too emotional, so they can't handle democracy, which of course is a ridiculous stereotype and shouldn't be entertained. But there are cultural reasons that had genuine effects. Religion was a very important part of Spanish society, both today and then, and the Second Republic's reforms and lack of reaction to anti-religious violence um, during this time played a very important role in people's support of the republic. There's and also just a king can have a lot of cultural power with the people. People are very used to having a king. There's been a king for as long as anyone can remember, and a new brave new world with no king and no religion can seem very scary to a lot of people, and to a lot of people that may not be the world they want to live in, and understandably so. So those are the cultural reasons we discussed. And let's see. So those are the three types of reasons. Then we brought it back to the timeline to reestablish something concrete, because those discussions can get very um, broad and general, and we want to bring it back to something more real. So we go back to our timeline and sort of try and stitch it all together, which went pretty well. And then lastly, I just wanted to show them a quick little video. Helps them with their language understanding, because they get to listen to English voices explaining things, and so that helps with their comprehension and listening skills. And also, it's just an interesting quality video that I found on the internet. So, in conclusion, I think it went really well. I think this is a interesting lens to look at history through. I was really glad with this reception from the students. There are also just a few points about the presentation. I know that sometimes it can look bare, like here there's not really any pictures except in the beginning and the end. That was mostly on purpose, because I really didn't want to put a lot of writing or much pictures at all, because I was trying to stimulate discussion. And if the students were spent the whole time fixated on some picture or some piece of writing and trying to copy, they wouldn't be doing what I really hoped they would be doing, which was thinking and asking questions and talking and having a discussion. And I think it worked pretty well, so I'm satisfied. Thanks for listening today, and hope you like my project.